lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, a 9-year-old girl is shot in her own home less than a week after an 87-year-old grandfather is stabbed to death in his mobility scooter. And what are our police doing? Yes, I can hear the background. That's right, they're doing the Macarena. So, after Lincoln police provoke fury for dancing at a pride event, are woke coppers proof we've become too soft on crime? Former Met Police officer and founder of the Protect the Protectors, Norman Brennan, battles broadcaster, businesswoman and LGBT ally Amy Ansell in the clash at 9:25. I want your verdict on this. It's so important. I'll reveal how you can take part soon. And as Lawless Britain spirals further out of control, should we lock up the nation's most violent criminals for longer? I'll debate at 10 p.m. with my superstar panel who are here all night. Former Daily Star editor and current columnist Dawn Neeson, media personality Christine Hamilton, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. As a shocking new record is reached, is the channel crisis a national emergency? I think so. And Nigel Farage will be here on that and his eye-opening expose into how so many illegal migrants are able to slip through the net at 9:40. Is Meghan Markle wrong to repackage her questionable behaviour as ambition and suggest her critics, well, I've got to be sexist?
I don't ever remember personally feeling the negative connotation behind the word ambitious until I started dating my now husband. Apparently, ambition is a terrible, terrible thing. For a woman, that is.
I'll debate the revelations from her explosive new podcast at 10:30. The beautiful city of Edinburgh is swimming in filth thanks to strike action, but that's nothing compared to the dirty tricks being cooked up by the unions to paralyse the next PM. I'll lay out the nightmare that could unfold on the streets of the UK and in Westminster if our future PM doesn't crush the likes of Mick Lynch. That's in my digest next. Will the endorsement of ex-First Minister of Northern Ireland and DUP leader Arlene Foster solidify Liz Truss as a defender of the union and the only woman capable of beating Sturgeon? Arlene explains why she's backing Liz the Lionheart at 10:15. With BBC talent, assuming the public is racist and teaming up with anti-Brexit, anti-Tory political groups, can the corporation be saved from its own biases?
To see him a couple of years ago in Constantine, one thing that I found actually quite troubling that night was I sensed that quite a lot of people in the audience were there so they could laugh at a bit of racism.
Trigonometry host Constantine Kisson, who you saw there expertly take down a partisan presenter live on the BBC, reflects in Uncancelled at 10:40. Why has America's leading COVID advisor, Dr. Anthony Fauci, stepped down now? And what will his legacy be? Will it be one of doom and devastation? Top US journalist Meghan Kelly beams in from across the Atlantic at 9:50. Plus, they're back and more ridiculous than ever.
I'm really struggling to breathe. Probably because I've got really severe asthma.
I'll give the tunnelling bores of Just Stop Oil a dressing down as I explore today's best viral stories in the media buzz throughout the 10-hour. Tomorrow's newspaper front pages on the way to, and the next greatest Briton and Union Jackass crowned at 10:50. So do start with us. It's going to be a great show. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though, and I didn't think Lawless Britain could get any more horrifying after the slaying of the 87-year-old grandfather Thomas O'Halloran as he raised money for charity on his mobility scooter in broad daylight in London. But the fatal shooting of the 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell after a despicable armed thug entered her home in a street brawl gone wrong is one of the most sickening crimes in living memory. The killer is still on the loose.
A 9-year-old girl, who we can name today as Olivia Pratt-Corbell, has died following a shooting in Dovecot last night, Monday, the 22nd of August. And her family are absolutely devastated, inconsolable and heartbroken. I know that the murder of Olivia has rocked our communities, who are quite rightly upset and outraged that such an abhorrent crime has occurred here on the streets of Merseyside.
We all are. So enough is enough. The police must get tough on violent crime. The government must introduce tougher sentences. And we must all demand change. Look, I know there are many crises battling for attention at the moment, but law and order needs to be at the top of the political agenda. More on that in the news now with Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you very much, Dan. I am Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have been going head-to-head in Birmingham at the Tory leadership hustings. Ms Truss claims Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer doesn't believe in opportunity, as she also vowed to unleash the potential of our great country. The Foreign Secretary added that she'll stand up against Starmer, another Labour leader she says doesn't believe in aspiration. Rishi Sunak says if he were elected as Prime Minister, he wants to take control of migration within the country.
It's why I have set out a detailed and radical plan to finally get to grips with illegal migration. Now, I stand here as a product of our country's proud, compassionate history in welcoming people to our shores. But it must be done legally. It must be done fairly. And when we turn on our TV screens and see the scenes of people breaking the rules to come here, it undermines trust in the system, and it is wrong, and we must stop it.
Meanwhile, Ms Truss has vowed to invest more money into smaller cities and improve trade deals.
That we will unleash investment into cities like Birmingham, towns and cities across our country. We could do more trade deals benefiting industries like ceramics, industries like the car industry, and I had a great visit earlier to JLR, industries like financial services and technology.
A manhunt is underway after a 9-year-old child was fatally shot in Liverpool last night. Police have named the schoolgirl who was killed as Olivia Pratt-Corbell. Officers were called to a house in the Knotty Ash area after an unknown man who was being chased by a gunman forced his way into the property. Police say shots were fired, hitting a woman, Olivia's mother, and fatally wounding the young girl. Detectives are urging criminals to assist with their inquiries and are asking anyone with information to come forward.
We need to find out who supplied the gun. We need to find out who else was on that street that night. We need to find out who was aware of the attack and what role they played.
A man who was reported missing nearly 8 weeks... A woman, who was reported missing nearly 8 weeks ago has been found safe and well. The Met Police say 24-year-old student nurse Owami Davies was found in Hampshire after a call to police from someone who'd seen media appeals. She was last seen walking in Croydon in early July, and concern had been growing for her safety. A record number of Channel migrants have crossed the English Channel in a single day. Nearly 1,300 were detected on small boats yesterday. It comes as GBNews saw evidence that those trying to cross to the UK in the back of lorries also continues to be an ongoing problem. In the past year, official figures reveal around 8,000 people were detected at UK ports having illegally crossed the Channel. TV online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Dan Wootton tonight.
So if you look at the streets of Edinburgh at the moment, a city that is meant to be on show to the world thanks to the festival, well, if you look at them, you'll get a glimpse of the horror and hell the militant unions soon want to unleash on the rest of the country. Bins are overflowing and the litter is piling high on the streets 5 days into a 12-day strike by bin men, even though they'd received a 5% pay offer. But politicians in the rest of the country, enjoying the humiliation currently being heaped on scheming Nicola Sturgeon, well, they should not be resting easy tonight, because it's this sort of chaos and carnage likely to be unleashed on the entire UK during a new winter of discontent as unions move forward with plans to paralyse the country in a new general strike. Just listen to Mick Lynch on GB News and you'll see where this is heading.
The British working people are not getting a square deal off their employers. That's all we're asking for. And we'll support other workers. People say, oh, why don't the nurses get what you're getting? Why don't the teachers get what you're getting? They'll all be coming into this debate in the next few months. Many of those workers will be balloted by their trade unions because they're sick and tired of rich people, old Etonians, telling us that we've got to pull in our purse strings and just put up with a cost of living crisis and job insecurity, and we're not prepared to do that.
Speaking in 2019, the General Secretary of Unite, Sharon Graham, she actually laid out her plan as to how the unions plan to jointly hold the country to ransom.
Conference, real change can come through the collective. Collective bargaining still remains the tried and tested method of pushing up pay and conditions. Unions acting collectively, stewards acting collectively, driving and pay-setting pay and pay-setting agreements.
So it's no surprise that, according to the Daily Telegraph's Christopher Hope today, Westminster is preparing for a cross-government strike by public sector unions. And make no mistake, this is a political move, a highly political move, actually, designed to paralyse the next Prime Minister. I mean, the plan is for the strikes to be announced during next month's Labour Party conference for maximum impact. The result could see large parts of the civil service shut down in the run-up to Christmas and the dark days of January and February as energy bills skyrocket. Hope says the scale of the unrest could approach that of the general strike from 1926, when millions of workers went on strike for 9 days. And a senior government source added, I don't think Rishi or Liz are ready for what they are facing. We are looking at the paralysis of the country. Now, Liz Truss today pledged to be bold and different as PM to tackle the scale of our economic crisis. But the headwinds buffeting her, well, they're going to be historically unprecedented. She must stand up to the unions and crush the strike action like Thatcher, or risk socialism being ushered back to Britain in the form of Labour, the SNP, the Lib Dem and the Greens in a coalition from hell that would be disastrous for our future. To respond now, my superstar panel, former editor, current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, the writer and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Christine Hamilton, there's a big part of this planned strike action which is aimed to bring down the government and to usher socialism back to the UK.
Oh, absolutely, and it's organised by people who have a pathologic and ideological hatred of everything that the government stands for. And I think behind that, though, I think one has to recognise that there are ordinary working people, whether they're in the post office or the rail workers or whatever, all these people who are going on strike, ambulance workers, London buses, underground, they're all...
barristers, forever.
Who actually are very frightened about the future. And they their leaders are able to tap into that insecurity, and they feel alienated too, I think, a lot of working people from the country, and I think that's what the unions are able to tap into. But yes, they want to bring down the government, and frankly, it's a very depressing thought, because we have two, in my opinion, inadequate people who are battling it out to be the Prime Minister who leads us up into the broad sunlit uplands. I don't see either of them is necessarily up to this monumental power struggle that we have got to have. Otherwise, I mean, you know, I remember the 1970s when you see the rubbish piled up in Edinburgh. That is nothing compared to what was piling up in London. The dead went unburied. It was absolutely horrendous, and it took a Margaret Thatcher figure to bring all that under control. I mean, prior to that, we'd had the union leaders. It was a regular sight. They would turn up for beer and sandwiches at number 10 with Wilson and Callaghan, and they just did a cosy little deal and off they went. But, you know, we're just going to have everybody's going to be chasing. The minute one lot gets their 5%, 10%, whatever it is, then the next lot. And then by the time you get to the end, the first lot are going to want to go again. It's got to be defeated. Absolutely, no question.
So, Dawn, with all of that in mind, what on earth can Liz Truss? We assume it's going to be Liz Truss, barring one of the biggest electoral upsets of all time. What can Liz Truss do? Because this is designed to bring down her government.
I think it is. I mean, I'm not entirely sure they want Labour in either, do they? And if it does come to that, we're going to end up, as you point out, with some sort of a hideous hung parliament when nothing gets decided whatsoever. I think Christine's right. She just needs to be tougher, or whoever it's going to be, but assuming it's this, she just needs to be tougher. And I just don't know whether she's got it in her to do that. I mean, you know, the civil service guy, I mean, how are we going to notice? Most have been working at home since the beginning of the pandemic. Well, they're going to picket their own living rooms or something or other. I mean, it's just getting stupid. Everybody's on strike now. And if you give everybody an inflation-matching rise, the country will go bankrupt. It's just not physically even possible. So what is the end game on this?
Well, indeed. So Rebecca Reid, what these unions are being then, with that in mind, is highly irresponsible.
I don't think so. I think a union's job is to serve the people who are members of the union.
To hell with the country.
Well, yeah, if I'm the head of a union, I care about people in my union. My job isn't the country. That's the Prime Minister's job. My job is looking after my people. If your union can't get you a pay rise, it's not a good enough union. Trust me, I'm a journalist. I know about unions that don't really work. But I think the thing is here, if someone's job is so important, the country can't function without it, maybe they deserve to be paid more.
Christine, how do you respond to that?
Well, that would apply to almost everybody, but I mean, President Reagan... Not us, no. We're just the fluff on the top. President Reagan had the right attitude when the air traffic controllers went on strike. He sacked the lot of them. But, I mean, you can't sack the entire civil service. You can't sack everybody. So it isn't going to work when you have a mass strike. But I think it's very worrying times ahead, as I said earlier. The ordinary working person is very worried about the future, and therefore they are more likely to support the strikes than otherwise. I think they need to make sure that the strikes are properly balloted and that the unions are passing on offers to members, etc., and everybody has a chance to vote on whether they want to accept.
They're not. Mick Lynch doesn't want a solution, Rebecca.
I know, but he needs to be made to do that.
So Liz Truss's whole thing was, I'm going to be really tough on the unions, and then she sent a list of things she was going to do that I didn't think were that tough, and I like unions. So stuff like 50% of people in the union
it's an improvement, though, isn't it?
Well, it does seem a bit mad that not even half of the people in the union have to agree to go on strike.
It's crazy.
Even I think that's a bit much.
And Dawn, I know you're a big believer in unions, but that is insane. And when we're talking about the running of our country, when we're talking about our health service, when we're talking about our justice system, there does have to be a responsibility.
What do you do? Just get badly paid and
the alternative is we work hard to get ourselves out of this place. All of us, Rebecca, all of us.
None of us work hard. We all sit on telly and talk about things. We don't have any idea what it's like to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to lift
Well, I
bags
do
of
actually,
rubbish.
because I have never been a rubbish man, but I've done lots of difficult jobs in the past that involve
I do, because my granddad was. My granddad was literally a dustman, so I know exactly what it's like.
I've done a lot of very dirty jobs in my time, but I mean, you know, I'm the age I am now, so perhaps I'm allowed not to do the dustbins anymore. But the trouble is that the country is trillions in debt, thanks to COVID and the ridiculous extension of furlough and goodness knows what. We're in the most perilous financial situation. Productivity has flatlined. If you don't make things, you can't make money. And if we don't get productivity back,
Totally.
You won't if nobody's working.
Totally. Which is why everyone needs to get off their sofa, all of the folk like us who are white-collar workers, go back to the office, do a proper hard day's work. We all, as a country, have to be productive.
Every single study has shown that people are as productive working hybrid as they are working pure office.
Absolute rubbish.
Those are independent
Rebecca,
studies
just
done by
look at the
economic
just look at the state of our economy compared to other countries in
what they want
Europe.
is for you to have to spend
compared to other
£11 on
countries
lunch
in
at
Europe
Pret every
who
day.
have gone back to work. Yeah, and it is important that we keep our town centres strong.
I'm just remembering
Final
something,
word,
and
Christy.
unfortunately, if I'd thought about it earlier, I would have checked who it was. But I remember back, it was when we were having strikes in the 70s, there was a company somewhere in the Midlands making widgets, and they all decided that they would put in an extra hour a week for the company. So all the workers, it was a sort of medium-sized company, so there were maybe 50 or 100 of them, and everyone said, yes, I will work an extra hour for this company to help it through difficult times. Now, that is the sort of attitude.
But you have to
If
have
we can
treated
get
them
that
well
back-
first. That only happens if you've been treating people well first.
Well, Rebecca, I'm sorry to claim that the government hasn't actually been treating people well. And remember, I'm someone that never wanted to lock down. I actually think it is a complete lie because the government, via us, taxpayers, provided an unprecedented furlough scheme which allowed a lot of folk to keep their jobs throughout the COVID pandemic. There was always going to be a repercussion for shutting down the economy for 2
individual
years.
companies can't expect people to work unpaid for an extra hour a week unless they've treated their staff really well previously.
But these
I agree with that, but we're not talking about private companies because, believe me, no one in private companies at the moment, apart from a few very rich ones, are getting pay rises at all, and we're all going to have to shoulder the massive inflation. So this is about the civil service who have had secure jobs
And
over all of
massive
COVID,
gold-plated pensions as well,
which are bringing down the country's economy too.
People in the private sector can only dream of the sort of perks.
And unfortunately, that's why I stick to my original thesis, Rebecca, which is that the folk who are pushing towards this general strike, they are doing it because they want a winter of discontent. They want things to get so bad over the next 2 years so that they can usher in a hard left government.
Your average bin man is either
I'm talking about the unions.
mastermind, a political mastermind trying to bring down the government, or would just like to be paid a bit more so that they can pay their bills.
No, but I'm talking about the
most people
unions
just want a bit more
because the
money in their
unions have been
pocket.
irresponsible in their negotiations. I believe in the current climate, the pay deal that, for example, Mick Lynch has been offered is appropriate because otherwise
the government.
the inflation's
his
going.
Members.
Is it?
His job is to be head of the union, therefore to look after the people he's in charge of. If I was the head of a union, I'd be looking after people in my
If you
union.
don't think Mick Lynch has ulterior motives, Rebecca, I think you're being incredibly naive.
I think he's good at his job.
The union bosses are playing on the sense of alienation that I think that a lot of ordinary working people feel. Alienation when they see shareholders getting huge amounts of money.
Absolutely.
Energy
and don't get me wrong,
They feel
a lot of the
alienated
system is
from the system.
broken. Yeah, and a lot of the system is broken. And Liz Truss has a massive job ahead of her once she enters Downing Street on the 5th or 6th of September. She is going to have to pull this country back together. And there's a lot she needs to do, and there's a lot the Conservative Party needs to do. So I'm not running away from that for 1 second, Rebecca, but I'm just saying I think the actions of the unions and talk of a general strike in this context, in the place that this country is currently at with the law and order completely out of control, I think it's highly irresponsible and I think it is politically motivated. But look, Rebecca Reid, Christian Hamilton, Dawn Neeson, my superstar panel, they're going to be here all night. But coming up, as a shocking new record is reached, is the Channel migrant crisis now a national emergency? Just another national emergency. I think it is, by the way. But this is why whoever becomes PM has a hell of a lot on their plate. Nigel Farage, live on this at 9:40. But first, after Lincoln police provoke fury for dancing the Macarena at a Pride event, are woke coppers proof we're just becoming too soft on crime? Former Met police officer and founder of the Protectors, Norman Brennan, and broadcaster, businesswoman and LGBT ally, Amy Ansell, go head-to-head in the clash next. Want to know what you think, of course. These people are meant to be protecting you, remember. Dan at GBNews.uk, use the Twitter handle at GBNews. Our poll running there too. The results after the break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Nigel Farage and Meghan Markle coming up, but it's time now for The Clash. The senseless killings of Olivia Pratt-Korbel and Thomas O'Halloran have left a dark shadow over this nation in recent weeks. There are no depths to which criminals of Lawless Britain won't sink, and critics are blaming woke policing for law and order going out the window. Thugs run amok while virtue-signalling coppers take the knee for BLM and do the YMCA in embarrassing stunts that lack self-respect. This latest video of police doing the Macarena at a Pride event in Lincoln has again got officers attracting all the wrong attention. Lincolnshire's Chief Constable Chris Howard said the officers' actions did not distract from their duties, and he expected them to engage with people attending Pride. But his colleague, the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police, Stephen Watson, has long insisted the British public are fed up with virtue signalling cops and they'd rather officers were out solving burglaries. But what do you think? Are woke coppers proof we've become too soft on crime? Let me know your thoughts by emailing dan@gbnews.uk, tweet me at gbnews. Plus, our poll running there too, the results shortly, but I'm delighted to be joined now by former Apprentice star and LGBT ally Amy Ansell, who goes head-to-head on this tonight with former Met Police officer and founder of Protect the Protectors, Norman Brennan. Norman, it feels incredibly inappropriate to me. The police doing the Macarena, the police taking the knee, the police cavorting with members of Extinction Rebellion. And it feels like it is directly linked with a breakdown of law and order in our society.
Well, you're absolutely right. The public don't expect to see the police dancing. The public don't expect the police to be doing anything except patrolling the streets, turning up when they call them, investigating their crime, and the most important word about British policing, and always has been, is impartiality. You take no sides. Whenever you turn up to a job or arrest someone, you listen to both sides, you make your decision or take it further to court. The sad reality is the public, in their millions, when they never see a police officer on the beat anymore, when they phone the police and they're lucky to get someone turn up, and rarely does a crime ever get investigated, when they actually see this dancing and prancing about and officers with multicoloured cheeks and epaulets and multicoloured cars, they are saying, what the hell has happened to policing? There's nothing impartial about that. It's pretty much like in Manchester. 10 Manchester United supporters in full uniform, police officers, are on with 10 Man City
supporters in uniform. And what they've done is they've taken their supporter scarves along, interacting, laughing and joking with the crowd. And then later on, it all cracks off in the high street, major public disorder, or they turn up at a pub. Whose side do they take then? A police officer needs to be impartial. They wear the same uniform. I've worked with gay officers, lesbian officers, black officers, heterosexual officers. And do you know what? I never saw them as that. I just knew that. They were police officers. The public and victims of crime want to see a police officer. They don't want to see all these gay pride officers. And in Hampshire Police, you had the police crime commissioner singing YMCA with dozens of high-ranking police officers, while I know that many victims of crime in Hampshire rarely see a police officer, and many that have been victims of crime of tens of thousands of thefts.
Very
and
strongly
over hundreds
put,
of
Norman.
thousands, never see
Very
anyone.
strongly put. Amy Ansell, why is he wrong?
I think the police were simply engaging with the community. I think there was a form of community policing where you're encouraging the citizens to to feel that they can trust you and ultimately work with the police in turn if there is the need to solve crimes. And ultimately they are forming the sense of community, and they're not taking sides necessarily. They're just simply, and you know what? How many were doing the Macarena? 4? How many police were there in Lincoln that day during that shift? A lot more than 4. So I think there's nothing wrong with engaging with the community that, you know, at one point there probably was a sense of mistrust there. And here, I think it was a great thing that they were showing that sense of camaraderie and solidarity. I think it was a fantastic thing.
Norman?
Well, I've been a police officer for 31 years. I've been in law and order and policing for 43 years. When I joined the police service, we engaged with the public. We didn't need to paint our faces. We didn't need to have multicoloured police cars and keep on banging on about our sexuality like so many senior police officers did. What we did, my friend, is we engaged with the public. We walked the beat. We interacted with them. We shared information. We supported them, we protected them, and when they gave us the information of those that committed crime, we arrested them. That is what community engagement is all about. The sad reality is nowadays, with all the prancing about, dancing and TikToking, and let's be honest about it, gay pride and the rest of it is not impartial. There is a view, there's an empathy for that type of person. What the public want, and what I know tens of thousands of frontline police officers want, is everybody to wear the same uniform, the same oath, be impartial, walk the streets, protect the public, turn up when victims are victims of crime, investigate the crime. It's as simple as that. None of this other prancing about and dancing and TikTok.
Because
in all of this, policing has been lost.
Oh, sorry, Amy, you come in.
Maybe times have changed. Things have moved on. We need that now from the police. I mean, what about when the police were waving Union Jack flags during the Jubilee? Should they not have done that? They did. What about there's anti-royalists out there? Would they feel that, you know, this was the wrong thing to do? We just need engagement with the police. And I think there was nothing wrong with 4 of them doing the Macarena for less than a minute. If a
Amy,
crime
don't
was
you get a
happening at the same
sense?
time-
But don't you get a sense, Amy, that the public these days have far less respect for the police? And that's one of the reasons why there is this crime wave all over the country.
But Dan, say a policeman or a few policemen, say 4, for example, were at a women's rally. I mean, obviously, with the Sarah Everard situation, if they were choosing to join in and support women, I think that would be a great thing, too. There's nothing wrong with police engaging with the public in all these different ways.
Okay, well, Norman, what about that? Norman, what about that? Would it be wrong for a police officer to take part individual for Sarah Everard, for example, following on what you're saying?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Hang on a sec. Absolutely off duty. Let me talk about the part you just raised. Waving a flag for our Queen on that particular special day, absolutely. Getting down on our knees to Black Lives Matter, absolutely not. It's one of the biggest own goals. The sad reality is, folks, is that the police have lost the streets of Britain. The public are losing faith in the police. The public are losing confidence in the police. They never see them. So when you ask the question, are we too woke? I'm afraid we are. Our senior management, in 43 years of policing and law and order, I've never seen such weak leadership within the police. No direction, no passion, no vision. They are lost. And these are the ones that are authorising and supporting and attending. And even one chief constable got down on his knee. You get down on your knee to nobody unless you're packing a hole with a bullet wound or a knife wound and trying to save a life and our Queen. We bow and kneel to nobody. We stand strong without fear and favour. That's how traditional policing has been, and that's what we've lost.
OK, very powerful stuff. Founder of Protect the Protectors campaign, Norman Brennan, and the former Apprentice star, Amy Ansell. Thank you both so much. So who do you agree with? Are woke cops proof we've gone too soft on crime? From Kojak. The police are a woke joke who violently assaulted anti-lockdown and pro-freedom protesters, yet they knelt for BLM, made cups of tea for XR and danced at Pride events. I really noticed that discrepancies too between those different types of events. Lisa says the Tories closed 600 police stations, closed half our magistrates' courts, reduced police numbers and support staff by over 20,000 and defunded legal processes to the point barristers cannot afford to work. Blaming police is a distraction. And from Louise on Twitter, there's no chance of reclaiming the streets until criminals have a healthy fear of the law and police, and that won't happen while they're policing Twitter, taking the knee, dancing the Macarena and driving around in rainbow cars. So really fascinating feedback there. Thank you for it. The result, though, the verdict is overwhelming. 93% of you agree that woke police are proof we've gone too soft on crime. Just 7% of you say we haven't. Now, coming up, why has America's leading COVID advisor, Dr. Anthony Fauci, stepped down now? And what will his legacy be? Will it be one of doom and devastation? Top US journalist Meghan Kelly joins me from across the pond at 9:50. But up next, as more migrants cross the channel in one day than ever before, are we now facing a national emergency? Nigel Farage walks us through that and his eye-opening expose into how so many illegal migrants are able to slip through the net. He's live, Farage live, in just 2 minutes.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
US media superstar Meghan Kelly, and a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages coming up. But it's time for What the Farage with Britain's favourite Nigel. And earlier today, the Ministry of Defence revealed that a record 1,295 migrants had crossed the English Channel yesterday, smashing the previous single-day record of 696 set only 3 weeks ago. Those shocking figures came after GBNews Home and Security editor Mark White revealed exclusive footage showing groups of migrants trying to force their way onto Briton-bound lorries in the port of Calais. The distressing footage, first shown on Nigel's show last night, laid bare the scale of the crisis, with HGV drivers forced to defend their own lorries without much help from patrolling French police in order to stop illegal migrants sneaking into British soil. Well, Nigel joins me now. And Nigel, you've got these record crossings, plus the dangerous scenes unfolding in Calais. I know there's so many crises at the moment, aren't there? There's the energy crisis. There's now a law and order crisis. But do you think, and I think I know the answer to this having watched your show tonight, but do you think it's time for the government to finally declare these illegal migrant crossings a national emergency?
Yes, Dan, I do. I think this is much deeper than a crisis. And I'll tell you why. The numbers crossing the Mediterranean are running this year at double the number of last year. And ask yourself a question, where do they want to go? What other European country gives them a 4-star hotel room? What other European country gives them dental care, medical care, 3 square meals a day, 38 quid a week spending money, and the chance to work in the illegal economy? They all want to come here. Yesterday was $12.95. I promise you, Dan, you ain't seen nothing yet. Why do I say that? Because yesterday, the lifeboats were mobilised from Ramsgate to Eastbourne. That's only the second time Eastbourne has been mobilised. That is a 63-mile stretch of the British coastline that was on full alert yesterday for illegal migrant crossings. And the numbers are going to go absolutely through the roof. Now we know a huge number of them are young Albanian men, intent very clearly on working in the illegal economy in this country. Is it an emergency for law and order? Yes. Or the ability, if the population explodes, for your kids to get a house? Yes. For your ability to get a GP appointment? Yes. But most important of all, and forgotten and ignored by the rest of the media, the clarion call that ISIS made in 2014, just before the Mediterranean crossing started, where they said, we are not confined just to these countries in the Middle East. We will spread our operatives via these routes into Europe and take on all of the disbelievers. Now, you can, if you want, ignore ISIS, or you could look at the barbarities that happened in Paris that night a few years ago. Appalling barbarities. 5 of the 8 men that did it crossed the Mediterranean. We are now letting in tens of thousands of undocumented young males. They throw their passports, their mobile phones into the English Channel. We cannot track who they are. We cannot see whether they've got serious criminal records. We are becoming a much less safe country as a result of this. And that's why this is now an emergency. But of course, ignored by Boris Johnson, who is spending his last few days on holiday in Greece or at Chequers. I mean, Theresa May I didn't like, but she spent her last few days pushing through issues that she actually cared about. Priti Patel, well, pretty useless, I think, is the summation of her time as Home Secretary. And the funny thing is, I interviewed tonight Stephen Kinnock, shadow Labour immigration minister. He has nothing to say, other than we'll crack down on the gangs and reduce the crossings. This is something.
How? Because I watched that interview, Nigel, and OK, all well and good that you say you're against the Rwanda plan. What is your plan, Labour? And nothing was forthcoming from him when you pressed him on that.
No, it was to crack the criminal gangs. And yes, let's be absolutely frank about this. The National Crime Agency did last month arrest 39 people, crack a big gang, and the numbers that came in July were fewer than I thought they would be. But when you can make millions of euros every single week, there's always somebody to plug that gap. So we have no government, no opposition. Most of London doesn't care. Most of the media doesn't care. GBNews, the People's Channel, we've led the way on all of this. We've led the way on the stories, led the way on the predictions. I promise you one thing. We will not deal with this issue until we get a proper Brexit. And a proper Brexit means, free of European courts, free of judges or jurists as they are in Strasbourg. It's going to need very firm leadership to deal with. And I know we've got a cost of living crisis, inflation rocketing, all of those things. But I'll tell you this issue alone will lose the Conservatives, the Red Wall. These people, ex-Labour people, they voted UKIP actually to begin with, but they voted Brexit. They voted for the Conservatives in 2019. To them, Brexit was about taking back control of our borders more than any other single issue. And we are being made an international laughingstock on this very question. So, Liz Truss, if you're going to win, deal with it. Do not rely on Dominic Raab's British Bill of Rights. It's not worth a row of beans. We're still signed up by international treaty to European courts. That is what must be dealt with. And I tell you something, I feel as much public support for my stance on this building up as I felt on the initial question of leaving the European Union. This is big.
And you're also right, Nigel, to raise the threat of Islamic extremism, because it hasn't gone away. And, again, it's something that just hasn't been spoken about for far too long. Nigel, I did want to touch on Lawless Britain, though, as well, because what we're seeing on our streets at the moment also feels unprecedented. There's a breakdown of society going on. The police, it feels like the woke police in lots of parts of the country have actually lost control of the streets.
Yeah, give it up completely. I mean, look, 50 youths ran in, ransacked, robbed a McDonald's in Nottingham. Yep. It's not a one-off. No. It's not a one-off. We saw this in Oxford Street a couple of weeks ago. Yep. But here's the remarkable thing. 50 young men go in, cause mayhem, not one arrest. Not one single arrest. I mean, you simply could not make this up. Now, why is that? Could it just be to do with the ethnicity of those that conducted that outrage? And I think I've drawn my own conclusion. And it says to me, the police are now full-on cowards. They're playing the PC game. They're playing the non-binary gender game. They're not dealing with serious lawlessness on our streets. And, we're showing this video now here on GB News, but this is going around everywhere. The signal is clear. Go out and rob. Go out and break the law. Nothing will happen to you. I mean, frankly, if this isn't gripped, our cities will become unlivable. And I worry sometimes, is it too late? Have we lost? And then I'm reminded of my friend Rudy Giuliani. Dear old Rudy. Now, he may be knocking on a bit. He might have made a couple of mistakes in the 2020 presidential election and afterwards. But when I first went to New York, Dan, in the 80s, in business, I remember you wouldn't leave a bar or a restaurant without the taxi waiting. And you'd worry about that cricket pitch length you had to go to get in that car. And you did it as quickly as you could, and you got out. New York was terrifying. And one man with courage, conviction, leadership, unafraid of being called, all the names under the sun, made New York safer than London. So I haven't yet given up on Britain's cities, but time is running short.
Well, yeah, we need our own version, don't we, of the 2 strikes and you're out policy. We need actual tough sentencing. Plus, we need to knock this woke madness out of the police, because I think you're right to talk about the fears the police have to deal with certain ethnic groups. I mean, we've seen that with the grooming gangs, Nigel, another story that GB News covers and the rest of the media seems to turn a blind eye to.
Yeah, I was fascinated. Rotherham, I actually discovered this week a newspaper article about grooming from 1973. 1973.
Been going on that long.
That's how long. That's how long this has been going on. Look, what we need is one thing, and one thing only, and it's called leadership. Now, I know you're backing Liz Truss to be the next Prime Minister. You're a man of wonderful faith in people, Dan, I have to say.
Nigel, we've got to have faith. Come on, we've got to have some faith.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. I hope, for the sake of the national interest, that Dan Wootton's bullish optimism about Liz Truss's ability to be bold and brave and take on these issues is right. I just fear that Nigel Farage's scepticism and cynicism may well prove to be...
She's not another Theresa May, Nigel. We, as a country, like in all seriousness, as a country, we cannot afford for her to be another Theresa May. It would be a complete disaster for this country.
I agree. I agree with that. Dan, I say it again. I hope you're right and I'm wrong. We'll see.
We pray. Nigel Farage, great to chat. Nigel, of course, back tomorrow night live at 7 p.m. here on GB News. But coming up, as Lawless Britain spirals further out of control, as we just discussed, should we lock up the nation's most violent criminals for longer? And what other measures could we introduce? Perhaps a British Alcatraz. That's a suggestion from one of my superstar panellists. They'll reveal all in the media buzz after 10. We're going to have the first newspaper front pages covering this story, as you would expect. But first, will America's leading COVID advisor, Dr. Anthony Fauci, leave a legacy of doom and devastation? Superstar US journalist Meghan Markle analyses why he's chosen now to step down and what his exit means for the COVID hysterics all around the world. We're back right after the break.
Join my show, Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Tomorrow's newspaper front page is coming up. A time now for star US journalist Meghan Markle, host of The Meghan Markle Show. And just as quickly as COVID disappeared, American doom-monger-in-chief Anthony Fauci has also decided to scuttle off into obscurity after 2 years of terrifying his country witless. But why has Joe Biden's chief medical advisor and director of America's National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases stepped down now? And what will be made of his, in my opinion, rotten legacy? Fauci flip-flopped on COVID more than a sandal on the beach during the pandemic, from masks and vaccine efficacy to distancing himself from ever promoting lockdowns. Here he is, by the way, in a viral clip from 2014, citing the basics of virology when it comes to natural immunity and taking vaccines after already being infected with flu.
But she's had the flu for 14 days. Should she get a flu shot?
Well, no. If she got the flu for 14 days, she's as protected as anybody can be, because the best vaccination is to get infected yourself.
And
so
she should not get it?
If she really has the flu, she definitely doesn't need a flu vaccine. If she really has the flu.
She should not get it again?
No, she doesn't need it, because it's the most potent vaccination is getting infected yourself.
Sensible stuff, right? Well, watch as he rubbished his own advice last year, totally trashing the concept of natural immunity and insisting infected people should take the jabs anyway.
This is a question from Jan in Arizona who says, will people who have already had the virus be recommended to get the vaccine as well?
The answer is yes, because once you get infected with the virus, it isn't certain how long that protection would be.
So what happened? Fauci seemed to completely throw his principles out the window when it came to pushing the vaccine, and you've got to wonder why. Meghan Kelly with me now. Meghan, is Dr. Fauci going to have the peaceful and relaxing retirement he thinks he deserves?
I mean, probably. He'll get hauled before Congress. Even though he's leaving the post, he can be subpoenaed, and he will be subpoenaed once the Republicans are likely take over the House of Representatives in November. But not much more is going to happen to him. The media's still in love with this guy. There are superhero dolls of him. The D.C. mayor proposed Anthony Fauci Day. They still think that he's been attacked unfairly and refuse to look at the documents that have been unearthed thanks to multiple public freedom of information requests and so on. Anthony Fauci says he is the science. He says there is now a Fauci effect in American medical schools, which is the numbers of applicants have gone through the roof. He says, according to him, though he doesn't want to brag, though they're applying because they've seen him and he has become synonymous with their craving for, and I quote, consistency, integrity, and truth. He's an egomaniac. He was placed in charge of our COVID response for the entirety of this crisis, and he has not been held to account on any of the huge blunders, lies, and intentional subterfuge he committed of sane responses to the pandemic. I could go through each one of them for you, but his nefarious behavior is very long and very troubling, and so far he hasn't been held to account at all.
And Meghan, it caused huge international damage, didn't it? Because all of us, all around the world, I mean, not me personally, but as a country, the UK put Fauci on some sort of pedestal.
He was placed up there like some sort of a god who was not to be questioned, that he was the authority. And the media played right along. And when you tried to question some of what he said, you would get called a conspiracy theorist. You would get blocked on Facebook or Google or Twitter for months. Yeah. And so people started to learn, you know, like the mouse that keeps getting the little door shut on his little paw. They stopped going through that door. They don't care how much cheese might be on the other side. They stop doing it because they get hurt. And we now know from having seen his behind the scenes documents that he actively worked with the head of the National Institute for Health, Francis Collins, throughout the pandemic to silence his critics, that they conspired to smear respected doctors from Stanford, from Harvard, from Yale, who were saying, you know what would make more sense than these massive lockdowns is to focus on, they call it focused protection, the most vulnerable, the elderly, people who are immunocompromised. And they made a coordinated plan to smear them as fringe freaks. And the media complied, and they got takedown, and they used the word takedown, articles placed in scientific magazines to try to silence any critics. And they were the ones who went to the White House and said, let's work with the social media groups to silence any questions about whether this thing, for example, came from a Wuhan lab. Meanwhile, it came out later, something else that Fauci denied. No, we never funded gain-of-function research at that Wuhan lab. We never did. Came out later. They did. They did fund gain-of-function research at Wuhan. They were forced to admit it after he denied it under oath. And the man they're celebrating with superhero dolls hasn't been proven yet, but may very well have had a hand in causing the very pandemic that he was placed in charge of managing. We'll never know because the media is not interested in asking that question. We know he funded gain-of-function research on bats that did exactly what this gain-of-function research that appears to have caused this pandemic did. We just don't know exactly where his path landed. And we may never know, because when he gets in front of Congress, he obfuscates, he plays the victim, he feigns indignity. And when the Democrats have been in charge, at least, time runs out and he's allowed to walk off screen and nurture his ego a little bit more on one of the Sunday shows or on CNN or on some program that won't ask him anything about what he did to cause the pandemic and what he did to cause the lockdowns, which resulted in more deaths than we're able to tally, not to mention the damage done to school children.
I know. And the collateral damage, which, by the way, Meghan, as we're seeing over here, is going to last for years and years and years in terms of excess deaths. Nothing to do with COVID, by the way, all to do with the lockdowns.
No. And instead, what we had was an Anthony Fauci saying, I am the science. When you question me, you question science. He was on the cover of Time magazine twice. He was on the cover of, it wasn't Vanity Fair, but it was a magazine like that, on the cover of People, giving interviews poolside, sitting, trying to look like James Bond, all four.
He's a star. He's a star. Oh, no, we've lost Meghan. Just at the most important point, because actually, let me tell you, this is very exciting. Meghan is the host of the brilliant Meghan Kelly Show, which you can find on SiriusXM, YouTube, and as a podcast. And guess what? Tomorrow, I am going to be joining Meghan for a very special live episode about a certain other Meghan who lives in America. You know, Meghan Markle. We're going to be talking about her in the next hour too. Meghan Kelly, thank you so much. It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, Lawless Britain is spiralling further out of control with a 9-year-old girl shot dead in her own home in the latest unthinkable tragedy, prompting our likely next PM Liz Truss to speak out.
There is a serious problem in this country with gun crime. You know, there's a serious problem with gangs. There's a serious problem with knife crime, and I'm absolutely determined we get a grip of that.
So, as Truss pledges to get tough on crime, is locking up violent criminals for longer the only way to restore law and order? Weighing in next and revealing their suggestions to tackle the crime wave, including a British Alcatraz, my superstar panel, former Daily Star editor and current columnist Dawn Neeson, media personality Christine Hamilton, and author and journalist Rebecca Reed. We'll discover throughout the show how tomorrow's newspapers have reacted to the senseless killing of young Olivia Pratt-Korbel too. Is Meghan Markle wrong to repackage her questionable behaviour as, quote, ambition and suggest her critics are sexist?
I don't ever remember personally feeling the negative connotation behind the word ambitious until I started dating my now husband. Apparently, ambition is a terrible, terrible thing. For a woman, that is.
I'll debate the revelations from her explosive new podcast. She's slagging off the royal family, of course, too. That's at 10:30. After pledging to take on Sturgeon, Liz the Lionheart has received one of her most crucial endorsements yet from ex-First Minister of Northern Ireland and DUP former leader Dame Arlene Foster. She'll explain why she's backing Truss to save the union live at 10:15. Can the BBC claim to be proud of Britain when top talent assumes the public is racist and colludes with anti-Brexit groups to take down the government?
To see him a couple of years ago in Constantine, one thing that I found actually quite troubling that night was I sensed that quite a lot of people in the audience were there so they could laugh at a bit of racism.
Trigonometry host Konstantin Kisin is going to be here to reflect on that viral clash with a partisan presenter, and he's going to weigh in too on the Beebs bias problem, whether it can save itself, in Uncancelled at 10:40 plus after returning to their tunnels. Isn't it just time for Just Stop Oil to bore off?
I'm really struggling to breathe, probably because I've got really severe asthma.
Well, maybe she should just stay down there. More in the media buzz coming right up. Plus, will Poldark finish in pole position in tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass? I'll discuss Aidan Turner's refreshingly unwoke comments on becoming a national sex object and reveal the rest of my panel's nominees at 10:50. But first, the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you, Dan. It is 2 minutes past 10. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have been going head-to-head in Birmingham at the Tory leadership hustings. Ms Truss claims Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer doesn't believe in opportunity, as she also vowed to unleash the potential of our great country. The Foreign Secretary added that she'll stand up against Starmer, another Labour leader she says doesn't believe in aspiration. Rishi Sunak says if he were elected as Prime Minister, he wants to take control of migration within the country.
It's why I have set out
a detailed and radical plan to finally get to grips with illegal migration. Now, I stand here as a product of our country's proud, compassionate history in welcoming people to our shores. But it must be done legally. It must be done fairly. And when we turn on our TV screens and see the scenes of people breaking the rules to come here, it undermines trust in the system, and it is wrong, and we must stop it.
Meanwhile, Ms Truss has vowed to invest more money into smaller cities and improve trade deals.
That we will unleash investment into cities like Birmingham, towns and cities across our country. We could do more trade deals benefiting industries like ceramics, industries like the car industry, and I had a great visit earlier to JLR, industries like financial services and technology.
A manhunt is underway after a 9-year-old child was fatally shot in Liverpool last night. Police have named the schoolgirl who was killed as Olivia Pratt-Corbell. Officers were called to a house in the Knotty Ash area after an unknown man who was being chased by a gunman forced his way into the property. Police say shots were fired, hitting a woman, Olivia's mother, and fatally wounding the young girl. Detectives are urging criminals to assist with their inquiries and are asking anyone with information to come forward.
We need to find out who supplied the gun. We need to find out who else was on that street that night. We need to find out who was aware of the attack and what role they played.
A woman who was reported missing nearly 8 weeks ago has been found safe and well. The Met Police say 24-year-old student nurse Owami Davies was found in Hampshire after a call to police from someone who'd seen media appeals. She was last seen walking in Croydon in early July, and concern had been growing for her safety. A record number of Channel migrants have crossed the English Channel in a single day. Nearly 1,300 were detected on small boats yesterday. It comes as GBNews saw evidence that those trying to cross to the UK in the back of lorries also continues to be an ongoing problem. In the past year, official figures reveal around 8,000 people were detected at UK ports having illegally crossed the Channel. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dan Wootton tonight.
Tomorrow's News Tonight now on our Media Buzz. The first front page is in, and following the tragic killing of Olivia Pratt-Corbell, the Liverpool Echo, her local newspaper, writes, "Imagine the terror of Olivia, just 9 years old, and her mum as a gunman bursts into their house and shoots them. Imagine the agony of Olivia's family as they're told she didn't make it, murdered in her own home. Imagine knowing something about this unspeakable crime, but keeping quiet because you'd rather surrender our city to the thugs than help get justice for Olivia. If this is you, ask yourself, whose side are you on?" The Eye also leads with the tragic case of Olivia. Police believe the shooting may be related to gangs in the city. The Metro leads with an impassioned plea from police after stating the killing crossed every single boundary. A powerful headline: "Tell us who killed little Olivia." And we're going to continue our discussion on this now with my superstar panel: former editor, current columnist for the Daily Star, Jordan Neeson, the writer and broadcaster, Christine Hamilton, and the author and journalist, Rebecca Reid. Now, of course, that senseless killing of Olivia is just another shocking hallmark of the spiralling crime wave that's plaguing our country. Tory leadership candidate and our likely next Prime Minister, Liz Truss, tonight vowed to get tough on violent crime in light of this latest tragedy.
First of all, my thoughts go out to the family, and it's an absolutely appalling crime, an appalling murder that took place in Liverpool. Yes, we do need to see more police on our streets. It's about recruiting more officers, but it's also about making sure those officers are focused on the crimes we care about and the public care about. There is a serious problem in this country with gun crime. There's a serious problem with gangs. There's a serious problem with knife crime, and I'm absolutely determined we get a grip of that.
But do you know that just 6 miles from where Olivia was indiscriminately gunned down, Karen Dempsey, a grandmother in her 50s, was fatally knifed after allegedly trying to break up a fight outside a Kirkby pub? The sorry state of Lawless Britain was tragically thrust into the nation's consciousness last week after 87-year-old Thomas O'Halloran was stabbed to death in broad daylight in lawless London while riding his mobility scooter, having been raising money for charity. And you don't have to look far on social media these days to find appalling evidence of criminals committing brazen crimes on our street without fear of retribution. The shocking incidents I'm about to show you all happened, believe it or not, within the past 48 hours. So is the only way to fix Lawless Britain to lock up Britain's violent criminals for longer, Dawn Neeson?
I think the sentencing needs to be looked at. I get the legal reasons why when you sentence someone for life they can be out in 15 years for good behaviour, but it doesn't make sense to most of us ordinary mortals out here. You know, if you commit a crime, especially like what's happened to poor Olivia and thoughts with her family and her friends at the moment, but if you commit a crime like that, then sentences do need to be tough. And, you know, it links into your Macarena story you were discussing, Dan, because, you know, gun crime on Merseyside has risen 51% in just 12 months. Just 12 months. And meanwhile, they, like all forces, and not just pulling out the Merseyside force on this one, they doing the rainbow-painted cars and they were rainbow-painted laces and things like that. And you know, the thing is, if you report like a non-crime hate incident, you'll have 4 police officers on your doorstep straight away. But you report a burglary and you get a crime reference number and that's it. Yeah. No wonder the criminals
And you know there's
are
zero
laughing.
chance. There's zero chance of being sold. So, Christine, tell me about this idea that you have of a British Alcatraz.
A British Alcatraz. Well, just first of all, I mean, there really are no words for what has happened to Olivia, and then we had this 97-year-old. It is just mind-boggling. What I am sure is that there are enough people in Liverpool who know who did it. They know who did it, and it probably, as the police think, is part of gangland. The police probably have a fairly short suspect list. It's just a question of nailing it down. Yes, I would certainly have much, much tougher sentences. And, well, I don't think I called it Alcatraz, but yes, why not find a remote Scottish island and take the killer of Olivia, cut and dried. If you find him, why should we put him up in a nice, comfortable prison with a television and goodness knows what? I mean, 2 things stop people committing crimes, really. One is, well, apart from general moral rectitude, stops most people, but people who are going to commit crimes, is fear of being caught. That's the first thing, and what's going to happen to them. If they have little fear of being caught because the police are out dancing instead of looking for... That is the first thing gone. And if they think they're just going to go to prison with a slap on the wrist and be out again, that isn't going to stop them either. So those are the 2 things. We need to toughen up on detection and then toughen up on sentences. I am not in favour of capital punishment. I don't think many people are any longer. And I'm not in favour of the police carrying guns, more than already do. I mean,
But I like your idea of this prison island. Let's put the murderers on an
it works,
island.
doesn't it? You know, it's very difficult to escape. Well, why not set them to work in something that's a little bit more arduous than sewing mailbags?
Rebecca Reid, surely longer sentences are the solution.
No, the solution is to work out at the beginning of people's lives why they are likely to become criminals and spend
So you don't
the
believe
money
in longer sentences?
early. I mean, in the case of somebody like the guy who killed Sarah Everard or the person who killed Olivia, I think you would have, if you have a heart, you want them to die in prison. But generally speaking, it is much, much more
What about
efficient.
anyone who kills anyone?
It's so much more efficient to work out how somebody gets to the point that they become a murderer. There's a reason that none
I think
of us
once
would
you've
kill
killed
someone.
anyone, genuinely, you should
there is a
not
reason-
leave prison. I so strongly believe that. I believe
that's a
life
huge-
should mean life.
That's a
I
huge
do.
sliding scale, because if it's manslaughter, if you're driving a car, if it's an accident,
manslaughter
if it's
is
in
not murder.
self-defense,
I mean, that's...
if you've been abused for years,
I know,
somebody
but
killed them, those are different
I
scenarios.
feel so strongly about this because my uncle was killed. He was a serving police officer in New Zealand, and he was killed by a criminal who was driving a car on the run from police, and my uncle was laying road spikes, and he was knocked down and killed. Now, that's manslaughter. He's out on the streets, not in this country, but in New Zealand. And to me, he murdered my uncle, and I think he should be in prison forever.
But the way that none of that would have happened would have been if that person had never got to the point in their life where they needed to be committing crimes, therefore being on the run, therefore killing another person. And what we need to do is work out, how do people become criminals, and how do you prevent that? And that is through much, much better education,
but the thing is,
social care, the social services being
like with my
reformed.
uncle, though, this killing of Olivia, she was an innocent victim who got caught up.
Yeah.
And so the problem
But
is
why are
they
people
weren't
in
going
gangs?
out of their way to commit a murder. And so that's the problem. It's about this culture of crime.
Evil. People aren't born murderers.
disagree. People are. Some people are.
Psychologically ill people
Some
do,
people
but generally
are.
speaking, the vast majority are not, unless you're...
Some of these gang members that are currently running Liverpool...
Well, but for how many of them...
You try
how many
and go
of them are
back and
born into
convince-
stable households with loving parents?
Quite a few, I should imagine.
I very strongly doubt that. I
Loving
really,
parents are probably
really
both
do.
gangsters as well.
I bet a drink...
So that's not a stable household, then?
For God's sake.
Well, which goes back to a debate that's been going on in the last few days about whether marriage is important, because that
Marriage is
creates
very
the
important.
most stable
And of course,
household. But I bet drink
we
and
need
drugs
to strengthen
plays a
society,
big part.
don't we? We need to strengthen society. We need to strengthen our moral core, and we all want that. But at the end of the day, that's a long-term project, and what we need to do now, Christine, final word to you, is toughen.
Well, we do, but I don't...
And toughen the police.
I don't want to be sexist about this, but it is a fact that 93% of murder convictions are men and 75% of victims are men. This is largely... I know Olivia is a complete difference, but obviously largely it's a man-on-man
Also, we know a
crime,
man
and
did it. Let's be realistic. There's no way a woman shot
No, there's
her.
no way a
It's
woman
just
would do
literally
that.
not possible.
And females, generally, if they are killed, they're murdered by their partner
Yeah.
or somebody who they know.
Or an ex-partner,
But this,
generally.
and I bet you drink and drugs has one or the other or both has something to do with
which
it.
is, again, why I think we need to have zero tolerance on drugs, too. Now, the eco-terrorist from Just Stop Oil, who, by the way, wastes so much police time, and it makes me absolutely furious, but they're back. And they're more moronic than ever as they occupy 4 tunnels in Grays, Essex, and the Kingsbury Oil Terminal in Warwickshire. And mother of 2, asthmatic activist Stephanie has plunged new depths of stupidity even for this mob. Watch.
Hiya, this is Stephanie with an update from our tunnel. It's 5:30 in the morning and I've spent the last 3 hours trying to get rubble out of the tunnel. I'm really struggling to breathe, probably because I've got really severe asthma. But we don't really have much of a choice to be here if I want to save my 2 children's futures.
I have to say, I'm struggling to have a scintilla of sympathy. Rebecca Reid, Christine Hamilton, Dawn Neeson, my superstar panel. Thank you so much. Now, do stand by. Coming up, I'm looking forward to this one. Is Meghan Markle wrong to repackage her questionable behaviour as ambition and suggest her critics are sexist? We're going to debate the revelations from her unbearably woke new podcast. You'll hear what she says too. Of course, she slags off the royal family as well. Of course she does. That's in the media buzz at 10:30. We're going to have more newspapers hot off the press by then too. But first, after pledging to take on Sturgeon, Liz the Lionheart has received one of her most crucial endorsements yet from ex-First Minister of Northern Ireland, Dame Arlene Foster. She'll explain why she's back in trust to save the Union straight after the break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, with scheming Nicola Sturgeon pushing a second illegal independence referendum in Scotland and power sharing in Northern Ireland at a standstill, preserving the union has emerged as a crucial battleground in the Tory leadership contest. So no nonsense, Liz Truss has come out swinging when it comes to toxic nationalism, slamming the deluded SNP and declaring herself a child of the union. That position has won her the backing of political firebrand, former First Minister of Northern Ireland, Dame Arlene Foster. And to help the cause, Arlene is currently setting up a brand new organisation called the Together UK Foundation that hopes to highlight the benefits of the union. My goodness, I am all for that. I'm delighted to say Dame Arlene joins me now. So, Arlene, what made you decide to formally endorse Liz Truss to be the next Prime Minister?
Well, good evening, Dan. It's lovely to be with you this evening and to listen to your superstar panel and all that's going on. Well, really, I was listening carefully to both of the candidates, all of the candidates, actually, until they were whittled down to two. Listening, of course, from my perspective as to how they were talking about the union, of course, in respect of Northern Ireland, how they were going to deal with the iniquitous protocol which we have to deal with, which causes checks on goods coming from Great Britain into Northern Ireland and reducing our choice, increasing our costs. How was that going to be dealt with? And I was alarmed that last October, you may remember, there were reports that Rishi Sunak was one of the people who stopped David Frost from triggering Article 16 to deal with that issue. And so I've been listening carefully to what they've had to say. The fact that Liz has taken on the union debate, has said that she is very much a child of the union, that she feels very strongly that the union has to exist for us all to gain benefits from it. I think she has very much shown that she has an emotional attachment to the union, but also realises the benefits of the union. And I just don't see that with Rishi Sunak.
No, very good point. Arlene, she also has a bit of a different approach to dealing with Sturgeon than, say, Boris Johnson. I want you to watch this and I'll get your reaction off the back.
The best thing to do with Nicola Sturgeon is ignore her. I'm sorry, she's an attention seeker, Seb. That's what she is.
I love that, I have to say, Arlene, because I think Boris Johnson has always treated Sturgeon with kid gloves, hoping that the respectful approach will work, but it hasn't really worked. So did you approve of Truss taking this, I guess, more forthright approach?
Well, I think what we need to do is to be more confident about the union and why the union is relevant to people in their everyday lives. We haven't been doing that, I don't think, really right across the UK, explaining why Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales and England are much better together, as we have been in terms of Scotland since 1707 and in terms of Ireland and then Northern Ireland from 1801. It's so important that we do stay together for prosperity, for economic betterment, for our health of our children, for the education of our young people, prosperity. There are so many reasons why the UK will continue to be a success. We're one of the G7 nations, of course, fifth largest economy in the world. So why in heaven's name would you want to destroy all of that and to leave the United Kingdom? So I think we need to be modern, we need to be progressive, we need to be positive, and above all, we do need to be confident, and I think that's what we need to achieve.
Totally agree. And the problem is, Arlene, as well, if you really zoom in to Sturgeon's record in Scotland, because obviously the SNP have a long track record now of being in government, and it's a disaster, isn't it? I mean, you look at the state of the NHS in Scotland, you look at the drug deaths in Scotland, you look at the education system in Scotland.
Well, I think one of the most frustrating things about the record of nationalism and republicanism is that whenever there's a problem, they blame Westminster. They don't take any responsibility for what's happening in the jurisdiction in which they have control and which they have devolved powers. And we've seen that in Scotland. We see it, unfortunately, in Northern Ireland from Sinn Féin as well. Instead of working together with Westminster to get actually the benefits that can roll from being part of the UK, they're fighting against whoever is the Prime Minister at that particular time. And unfortunately, we've seen that writ large with Boris Johnson over COVID. I have to say the way in which the UK rolled out COVID vaccinations is a very good example of why the union works and works very well. But pushing back on that, you've seen the way in which Nicola Sturgeon always wanted to do things differently in Scotland, not because it was better for the citizens of Scotland, just because she wanted to do something different.
Totally. I wanted to ask you about language as well, Arlene, because Truss's team say that rather than talking about Scottish independence, they're going to start talking about Scottish separatism. I actually think that's really important, to be honest. But do you think that's right?
No, I do think it's right, because let's face it, what the SNP and what Sinn Féin want to do in Northern Ireland is to destroy the union. They want to destroy our way of life. They want to go off on a myth-making fairy tale in relation to an independent Scotland or a united Ireland, instead of dealing with the realities of the UK. I mean, who's going to pay your pensions if you leave the United Kingdom? Who's going to look after you in terms of your health and well-being and your education and your welfare if you leave the United Kingdom? So they need to be challenged in all of that, and that's why I've come together with others to form this Together UK Foundation. We're going to push back against some of the myths that are there, and also this argument that an independent Scotland or United Ireland is inevitable. They're not inevitable, and therefore we have to push back against that narrative, and that's certainly what I hope we can achieve.
I think this foundation is so important, actually. I fully support it. So how is it going to work? Is it going to see you be more visible? I mean, what's Together UK all about?
Well, it's about pushing back against the narrative. We'll be doing research. We'll be talking to people on the ground, because I think that's really important to get right out across the United Kingdom to do that. We'll be holding conferences and seminars where people can come together and talk about what is the benefit of being in the United Kingdom, what's its relevance to young people today, how can we reach out to people who don't really understand, to take it for granted, frankly, the benefits that they get from being part of the UK. Let's talk about that. And let's destroy the myths that are available. It's all going to be better if we're in an independent Scotland. I mean, for goodness sake, what happens to the defence of the UK if we lose Scotland or if we lose Northern Ireland? That's a huge question, and one that's not talked about at all. So let's get real. Let's have those conversations right across the United Kingdom. And what I'm looking forward to the most is going across England and actually engaging English people in why it's better that we all stay together.
OK, Arlene, count me in. Seriously, I think this is such an important concept. We need this. We need to fight Fire with Fire, and the Together UK Foundation, I think, sounds like an absolutely brilliant idea, so well done. That was former First Minister of Northern Ireland, Dame Arlene Foster. But coming up, how can the BBC claim to serve the British public when it assumes they are racist? Trigonometry host Konstantin Kisin reflects on his viral clash with a presenter who seemed to say just that. He's also going to weigh in on the BBC's bias problem too. That's an Uncancelled at 10:40. But coming up, is Meghan Markle wrong to repackage her questionable behaviour as ambition and suggest her critics are sexist? We'll debate the revelations from her explosive new podcast straight after the break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight now in our media buzz. Lots of front pages have been delivered. One story dominating. The Daily Express covers poor Olivia Pratt-Corbell's death with the headline, "Just a Child, the Innocent Victim of Gun Wars." The Sun's headline, "Gunned down at bedtime and left to die." Shockingly, Olivia's killing came on the 15th anniversary of the gang gun murder of 11-year-old Rhys Jones, which also happened in Liverpool. The Daily Mail headline reads, "Picture of innocence to shame Lawless Britain," as it covers tragic Olivia, writing how her killer, quote, "stunned the nation." Olivia Pratt-Corbell's gunman, quote, "opened fire with complete disregard," says tomorrow's Independent. The youngster was described as having a bubbly personality. The Guardian reports on how grain firms are allegedly profiting from a, quote, "unjust hunger crisis amid soaring food prices." The world's top 4 grain traders have seen record or near-record profits after food prices surged 20% this year. That's according to the United Nations. The Daily Telegraph reports UK diplomats are urging EU leaders to keep up support for Ukraine amid fears that financial aid could be reduced due to the global cost of lockdown crisis. And thank God we need this, actually. A bit of levity from Dawn Neeson's paper, The Daily Star. I'm going to be asking you about this one after the show, Dawn. 20-minute sex sessions twice a week are as good for you as quitting smoking, according to medics. And Dawn Neeson, there you are. Yes, yes, yes. And there's the photo alongside. Do you agree with this, Dawn? 20-minute sex sessions twice a week? Good for you?
Been married for 36 years, love. What would I know?
Dawn Newsom here alongside the writer and broadcaster Christine Hamilton and the author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Now, there are a lot of choice words you could use to describe Meghan Markle, and ambitious, probably the least offensive, I would say. But in the first of her long-awaited Archetype podcast, released more than a year after landing the big bucks deal with husband Harry, she's hit out at those who criticise her for being just that when she started dating Prince Harry. Speaking to Serena Williams, she seemed to suggest that the term frequently used by her critics is sexist.
This message to me and my classmates was clear. Our futures as young women were limitless. Ambition? Well, that was the whole point. So I don't ever remember personally feeling the negative connotation behind the word ambitious until I started dating my now husband. And apparently ambition is a terrible, terrible thing. For a woman, that is, according to some. So since I felt the negativity behind it, it's really hard to unfeel it. I can't unsee it either in the millions of girls and women who make themselves smaller, so much smaller, on a regular basis. The misconception that if you're an ambitious woman, you have an agenda. You must be calculating, or you're selfish or aggressive, or a climber.
Oh no, you're none of those things, Meghan, are you? Not done there, she also took a swipe at the royal family, heavily implying they forced her to continue royal engagements in South Africa after a fire broke out in her son's nursery. Now, fortunately, baby Archie was actually elsewhere in the residence at the time, but instead of simply cancelling her next public appointment, as she could have done, Meghan chose to press on and now blame the awful, terrible monarchy for forcing her to go to work.
What did we have to do? Go out and do another official engagement. And I said, this doesn't make any sense. Can you just...
Why did you not bring him?
I was like, can you just tell people what happened? And so much, I think, optically, the focus ends up being on how it looks instead of how it feels. And part of the humanizing and the breaking through of these labels and these archetypes and these boxes that we're put into is having some understanding on the human moments behind the scenes that people might not have any awareness of, and to give each other a break. Because we did. We had to leave our baby. And even though we were being moved into another place afterwards, we still had to leave him and go and do another official engagement.
I couldn't have done that. I was at...
yeah, well...
Oh, my rage at listening to that. Seriously, absolute baloney. Let me tell you, you are the Duchess. If you don't want to go to the engagement, you cancel the engagement. You've done that many times before. Harry has done that many times before. But I also find this victim mentality over a non-accident at their home, where baby Archie was completely fine, or at the place they were staying, completely and utterly ridiculous. Lots of people have near misses, and then guess what? Have to go to work in Tesco, have to go and drive the tubes. This is just absolute nonsense. But anyway, Christine, what I want to pick up on, though, is this idea that somehow we all hate Meghan because she's ambitious. Is that what this is about?
I couldn't agree with you more about that ridiculous incident with Archie. Frankly, to me, she's a nauseating, self-centred, selfish individual, and I think she's completely ghastly. But I have to say, she does have a point, but she is 25 years too late. I wrote a book in 1997 called Christine Hamilton's Book of British Battle Axes. Yeah. And in the foreword to that, I picked up on the fact that if a woman is strong and tough and determined, they actually get all the wrong adjectives. They're bossy, they're shrill, they're strident, etc. Look what Margaret Thatcher got. If a man has the same attributes, he is regarded as strong and tough and leadership. So to a certain extent, she is absolutely right that we women do have to put up with totally different perceptions of what in fact are the same character traits. But no, we don't dislike, well, I only speak for myself, I don't dislike her because she's ambitious. There is nothing wrong with ambition in men or women. I dislike her for a host of other reasons which I haven't got time to go into now.
That's the problem, Dawn. She's sort of completely rewriting the narrative on this. no one ever had a problem with Meghan being ambitious.
No, it's always her truth, isn't it? I mean, she's admitted that herself. I mean, the thing is, she's misusing the word ambition here, because ambition, as Christine's quite rightly pointed out, in women it's a bad thing, in men it's a good thing. And, you know, Meghan being ambitious in her career, and she was successful at whatever she was in, I can't remember, Suits, wasn't it? She was successful there. That ambition is not what she's talking about here, is she? Because she's saying, I didn't realise ambition was a bad word until I started dating my husband. So what is the implication behind that? That we hate her, and I don't hate her, by the way, I don't give a damn about the woman, but that we hate her because she took our prince away from us, that we think she's some sort of gold-digging social climb-up. Some people do. You know, she may well be, she may be not. But that's the word, the way she is using ambition here. That's what she's implying.
I mean, Rebecca...
Again, it's having a dig at us.
Well, it is. Because, Rebecca, that's what I feel. It's just having a dig at us for telling the reality of Meghan. Because, remember, I reported lots of these stories in my previous life. And here is the reality. Meghan was a lowly American TV actress who was desperate to find a British celebrity husband. She made that clear to lots of people. She tried out a few of them, like Matt Cardle and Max George and Ashley Cole. Didn't manage to snare any of them. They weren't interested, and so hit the jackpot when she got Prince Harry. Now, that is a form of ambition. It is also a form of social climbing. Now, I'm not actually putting a moral judgment on that, but it is the facts. That is what happened. That's part of her life story.
Yeah, there's, the same as everybody else has said. There are two things here. It is absolutely unquestionably true that women are punished for being ambitious, that words that are like pushy and shrill and feisty and all these and bossy are not applied to men and are applied to women.
Feisty is good. I like being feisty.
It's not
you
a
are
bad
feisty,
word,
my
you
goodness.
you never hear men being called feisty. Men are just sort of neutral when they're being strong.
They're alpha males.
Yeah, but
exactly.
Feisty is a positive word, I think.
But bad and good, there are so many words that only ever apply to women. So she's right about all of those things. The difficulty is she speaks like she has suffered a great, great, great deal. And I find her conversation with Serena Williams difficult because she actually has, like, she nearly died in childbirth. The racism that Serena Williams has experienced is astronomical. She's a real fighter who's really suffered, and I don't really understand how those two women are having a conversation like equals.
To be honest, I sort of think Serena Williams was sitting there rolling her eyes a little bit, Christine, because she just said, oh, why couldn't you take him? Of course Meghan and Harry could have taken Archie to wherever they were going to.
To be fair, fair to her, if I found out there had been a fire in my daughter's room when she was downstairs, I would lose my mind.
Absolutely.
That is
but Rebecca,
terrifying.
you could call in sick to this show or say we've had a terrible incident. I'd say absolutely understandable.
Feel better,
you're not going to have to come.
Yeah.
But believe me,
and I'm not
Meghan could have done the same thing. And this idea that she's controlled.
Well,
I mean, who's controlling her?
The idea that she wasn't allowed to have therapy. They tried very hard to get Diana to have therapy. There's no way 30 years later they didn't want Meghan to have it.
I mean, I know the people, Christine, who were surrounding Meghan at that time. And they were terrified of her. I mean, they were absolutely terrified of her. So if Meghan asked them to do something, they did it. So if Meghan had said, look, I don't feel emotionally strong enough to go on this next engagement, they would have arranged alternative plans. They would have made up an excuse. They would have said she had a stomach bug or whatever it was.
Yeah, but that doesn't suit her narrative. She has to bring the royal family in and she has to attack the royal family, and that is a perfect little excuse. Because
and by the way, she clearly saved this anecdote up, Dawn. I mean, the problem is she's just so scheming.
You don't like Meghan, do you?
Well, look, I've reported on the woman for years. I just know a lot about her. And the thing is, it's like she's got this first episode of this Spotify series. She's banked up a little anecdote to make the royal family look bad that she didn't tell Oprah Winfrey. It's very scheming, it's very conniving.
It is, yeah, and one could say it was quite ambitious.
Do you know what's funny? She's got
I'm
Mariah
amazed
Carey.
But it's very, very
to
clear.
The interview, I haven't.
It was incredibly clear that she thought she could change the royal family. And I have to say, that is an astronomical level of self-belief that I wish I had, that you go in and think, I can change an institution that goes back hundreds of years.
Indeed, by the way, she's interviewing Mariah Carey next week. So basically, Meghan's just like a showbiz journalist now, which is great. She's interviewing Mariah Carey. And I did just think, OK, she's probably managed to find the one person in the world who is a bigger diva than her. So good on her for that. Now, losing your car keys can be very annoying, but this is quite an extreme solution. Tesla fan Brandon Delally, or maybe it should be Doolally, pictured standing next to his beloved vehicle with a flamethrower, there he is for some reason, has had a chip implanted into his hand that allows him to open its door with a simple swipe. Look. Oh my God, for goodness sake. Incredibly, Brandon has actually been through this procedure before, installing a chip allowing him to make monetary transfers, which he describes as like Apple Pay, but in your hand.
Somebody could take him up to his car, hold his hand against it, get rid of him.
It's not even quick. He's there rubbing his hand against it.
You know, I'm actually slightly envious. We've got a Lexus, second-hand, I have to tell you, and we lost the second key, etc., etc. It cost us £500.
Well, don't get one implanted into your hands. Christina Hamilton, Rebecca Rees, Dawn Neeson, do stand by, because coming up, will Poldark finish in pole position in tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jack? That's the crowning moment of the show coming up soon. But first, can the BBC claim to be proud of Britain when top talent assumes the public is racist and colludes with anti-Brexit groups to take down the government? Trigonometry host Konstantin Kisin reflects on his viral clash with a partisan presenter and weighs in on the Beeb's bias problem in mere seconds. First, though, here's a look at tomorrow's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, I'll lay bare the crisis at the heart of the Conservative Party as I explain why it's time the people took back control of the Tories in a special digest. Plus, we'll have unfiltered opinion from ex-Corrie actor and voice of the people Charlie Lawson and columnist extraordinaire Rod Liddell. And I'll break down the day's biggest headlines with my superstar panel. Top Daily Mail columnist Amanda Patel, the Daily Telegraph's associate politics editor Christopher Hope, and broadcaster Ashley James. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, his on-screen persona revels in ending the careers of bent coppers, but Line of Duty actor Adrian Dunbar has also claimed credit for hastening the departure of one of the show's harshest critics, Dame Cressida Dick. Dunbar confirmed everyone's suspicions yesterday by admitting that he had lent his voice to the spoof version of the BBC drama created by the anti-Tory, anti-Brexit campaigners led by donkeys. Here's a quick reminder of that politically charged clip.
Who exactly does the Metropolitan Police work for, ma'am? Our citizens or Boris Johnson?
Downing Street.
Now, Dunbar said the show's creator and fierce Boris critic Jed Mercurio put them up to it. He told the Radio Times, "Jed told us, these guys are really good. Would you record this and that?" So we did, and I think they treated it a bit, so it kind of sounds like us, but might not be. It was very good. It didn't quite get rid of Johnson, but it got rid of Cressida Dick. This latest glaring example of a high-profile yet highly politicised BBC star colluding in anti-government bias comes after the outrageous claim by a BBC Scotland presenter that he could tell audience members were racist just by looking at them. Thankfully, Trigonometry host and friend of the show Konstantin Kisin wasn't having any of it and called out his bizarre bias. Watch.
From a personal experience, as I said, I went to see him a couple of years ago in Constantine. One thing that I found actually quite troubling that night was I sensed that quite a lot of people in the audience were there so they could laugh at a bit of racism because they don't get the chance all that often. Does that trouble you?
If I were a mind reader like you, it would trouble me. I have no idea why the people were enjoying his show. I have more faith in human beings than perhaps you do. I believe that people are able to understand irony and very clever comedy that Jerry Sadowitz does.
Well, as you correctly point out, I was there, you weren't. I was watching what was going on around me and trying to assess who thought what about it. But listen, it was fascinating to hear.
And how did you assess that? Sorry.
Well, just by judging, by watching people watching their body language and listening to them around the venue.
You can tell what someone thinks.
No,
from
I'm
their
not.
body language.
I'm not saying I knew
Very
what they were
impressive.
thinking. I'm just saying it struck me that that might have
No,
been
no,
the
you
case.
did say you knew what they were thinking.
No,
you said exactly that. You said that you knew that
I said
they
I
were
was
there to
concerned
laugh
they
at the
might have been.
racism.
But listen, we are out of time.
Konstantin Kisin, you absolutely owned him in that moment. I mean, he couldn't wrap up the interview quick enough. But this is an example of the way the BBC think, isn't it? I thought it was actually quite indicative. It was quite a revealing moment, Konstantin, live on air.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly you run out of time once your argument gets destroyed, isn't it? But yeah, I know what you mean, Dan. I think there is, when we're talking about, as we did in this case about comedy, there's always this assumption that sort of people in the BBC sitting in they can go and see a show by a comedian like Jerry Sadowitz, and they get the irony, but the sort of plebs around them are suspect, and they can see that's why they're there. And I think it comes from a sort of a snooty attitude among some people. They look down their noses at people because they have a different accent, or they come from a different part of the country, or they didn't go to Oxbridge, or whatever it might be. And I think that's a problem, particularly for a broadcaster that those very people pay for.
No, indeed it is. And Konstantin, what did you make of this revelation that the Line of Duty cast have actually been contributing to these led by donkey videos in their Line of Duty persona? That feels a bit biased too.
Yeah, I didn't follow this story specifically, but I do think it's really important for a public broadcaster like the BBC to stay well away from this sort of thing. And I'm afraid they haven't been doing that for the last 6 years and probably longer. I do think it's so important for the BBC to be perceived as being neutral. And, they have gone some way towards undermining that, which is unfortunate in my view.
Well, it is, especially seeing that we know the BBC comes from an anti-Brexit position anyway. Look, Konstantin, I wanted to get your thoughts on a new BBC impartiality row actually breaking tonight. So I'll talk you through it. It starts with the corporation's wokey-in-chief, Gary Lineker, tweeting, "As a politician, how could you ever, under any circumstances, bring yourself to vote for pumping sewage into our seas? Unfathomable." Now, this tweet actually saw him go to war with the BBC journalist and one of the few people at the corporation who actually understands the remit of the BBC. I actually like this guy, Home and Foreign Affairs editor Neil Henderson. He asked, "Do you have the freedom to tweet about this sort of thing because you have different contract to mind?" To which Lineker replied, "Of course," before claiming that duty of impartiality applies, quote, "only in news and current affairs." So this is fascinating, isn't it, Konstantin? Because it feels like there's actually a divide at the BBC. You've got the folk like Lineker who don't give a damn about maintaining the impartiality, and then a small group of journalists who are increasingly outnumbered.
Yeah, look, I think actually, I probably agree in this instance. I think it's really important that the news side of things is impartial. Gary Lineker isn't an expert in politics, as you can tell if you follow his Twitter. But I do think he should be able to speak his mind, and he is entitled to make those comments, in my opinion. But of course, in an environment in which people are already concerned about the impartiality and neutrality of the BBC, this will be a bad look. Although, as I say, I do think actually he should be able to speak his mind if that's the contractual situation that he's got.
And you think that's because he's not a news broadcaster?
Well, that's my understanding from what's been said there, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I just have a bit of an issue with it because I feel like he is one of their star broadcasters and he has been on a campaign to bring down the government. Personally, I would say, if you want to express your views or do what you do in your podcast, brilliant podcast, Konstantin, or I do what I do here, just don't expect to take public money for it. I think it's quite simple.
Yeah, I hear what you say. As you know, my view is always to err on the side of freedom of speech, and I think Gary Lineker should be able to speak his mind if that is what his contract says. You're right; it may be an issue for the BBC to review the contracts that they sign with people in his position, but since he's not in news, he's not shaping the agenda of the BBC. When I turn on Match of the Day, I don't see him slagging off the government. Fortunately, or I'd switch off from that as well.
That is very true. Konstantin Kisin, author of the brilliant new book, An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West. Thank you so much. But it's time now to reveal today's greatest Briton and Union jackass. My superstar panel return. Dawn Neeson, who's your greatest Britain nominee tonight?
Mine is going to be Aidan Turner, the Poldark actor, who has actually given an interview mentioning that very picture, saying it was fun, he didn't feel objectified by it. One of the few actors who doesn't turn everything into a victimhood.
Do you know, I'm so happy about that because it would be so easy for him to be po-faced and say, oh, my goodness, I was a victim of, people taking advantage of me for how I look. And he just said, no, it's part of the job. So he had a sense of humour with it. Oh, and there he is. We're going to objectify him now. Christine Hamilton, your nominee.
Well, mine is honorary because she's the Finnish Prime Minister, Sanna Marin, because she was shown throwing everything to the winds, caution to the winds, dancing away like a young lady was what she is. And straight away she was criticised, everybody came down on her head and she said, right, I'm going to have a drugs test, I'm putting this to bed straight away. She was accused of being on drugs. Of course it came out negative. Good for her.
Exactly.
Like
you want young people to enter into politics.
Exactly.
Well, they're going to act like a young person,
Of
which
course
is exactly
they are.
what she did.
I thought she was fabulous. And having that drugs test was really what makes me put her forward for nomination.
Rebecca Reid, your nominee.
There's a conversation about whether people who've taken in Ukrainian refugees should be given more money to look after them. And I think we've the glory's worn off. We've forgotten that people have still got strangers effectively living in their house. So my greatest Britain is everybody who is still hosting a Ukrainian refugee.
OK, well, all good nominees tonight, but I'm actually going to go with Aidan Turner. And
Of course you are, Dan.
Do you know what?
Can we have the picture back up for a bit?
Yes,
not that one. Not that
picture. Him anymore, Rebecca. But, there he is anyway. Just for you, Rebecca. But look, I just think, just have a laugh about it. I hate all of these, very woke celebrities.
The picture's gone, Dan.
Anyway.
But the picture
Dawn Neeson,
I've got it on my fridge.
Sorry, we've already discussed her at length tonight. It's Meghan Markle for the podcast. And in one particular line I thought was great, and it was her describing how traumatised she was watching Serena Williams play tennis.
Oh, she's traumatised at the drop of a hat. Christine Hamilton, your nominee.
Well, it's pretty difficult to beat Meghan Markle, but the dancing cops dancing the Macarena when they should have been out fighting crime.
And Rebecca Reid, your Union Jackass nominee. Oh, actually, let's just have a look at this. This was ridiculous, wasn't it? Rebecca Reid, who's your nominee?
Mine's whoever took the picture of Aidan Turner away. No, I'm joking. Mine is Tony Blair for deciding that, yet again, he's decided to get involved. He's not in charge anymore, not for a long time. Apparently, we should scrap A-levels and GCSEs. And it's his fault, effectively, that tuition fees ended up going up so much because he thought that 50% of people needed to go to university, which they don't.
Wow, what a brilliant smorgasbord of jackasses for me to choose from. Every single one of them could have won. But I'm going to go with Rebecca Reid and make today's Union Jackass Tony Blair. Blair, back off. I'm sick of hearing from you. Go and spend your dodgy millions, but stay out of our politics. Oh, my goodness, I'm sick of it. Rebecca Reid, Christine Hamilton, Dawn Neeson, fabulous superstar panel this Tuesday. Thank you so much. I'm back again tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Thank you so much for your company tonight, though. Headliners is up next. Good night.
Good evening. Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. Some big contrast with the weather tomorrow. A soggy Wednesday in some spots, but a hot one across East Anglia and the southeast. We're all going to start fairly warm. It's going to be a humid night tonight. Low pressure is kind of in control of things, but these weather fronts and the position of them is crucial. This one coming into the southwest, approaching Wales, will bring some fairly persistent rain, of course, particularly southwest Wales tonight and tomorrow. The rain, though, will spread more widely across Wales tonight into parts of northern England eventually and southern Scotland. One or two showers across the east this evening, one or two heavy ones as well, but they're fading away, and for most it's dry, and for most of us a really warm and humid night. Look at these temperatures for England and Wales. Towns and cities staying in the high teens quite widely.